Okay, we're going to start our meeting. Thank you, everybody, for welcome to the end of the summer, beginning of the fall Whippany River Watershed Action Committee meeting. This is Thursday, September 5th, 2024. My name is Siva Janata, the chair of the Watershed Action Committee. And
thank you for inviting us here. As it was mentioned, I'm Anthony Marrone, District Recycling Coordinator for the Morris County MUA, and I'm joined here with Maura from my office. What I'm going to do first is just go over a little bit about what the MUA is, what we do, and bring you up to speed on what we do as a county for vegetative waste recycling in a more industrial sense. So pretty much about us, in 1958, we were actually established as this region's water provider for Morris County. And then in 1987, the MUA was designated the County Solid Waste Management Agency. So pretty much for 66 years, we've served as Morris County's environmental resource, meeting our county's regional drinking water, solid waste, and open space preservation needs. What we do is, as I had mentioned, water distribution to about 8% of Morris County. Open space conservation and land acquisition, the Morris County MUA receives about 5% of the open space trust fund budget for Morris County, which we use to preserve different water opportunities, pretty much around our water distribution, our water wells, which are in Roxbury, Randolph area, and Mount Olive. We also have two solid waste transfer stations, so we provide garbage disposal options for Morris County. We have something called waste flow, where waste can't come into the county from outside of Morris County, and it can't go outside of Morris County if you're a generator. It all has to flow to two transfer stations that we own and will hopefully operate very soon, which are in Mount Olive and Parsippany. We also operate two vegetative waste disposal sites. Those are in Mount Olive and in Parsippany as well. And then we also do material delivery services with the back-end compost and mulch that we make from the products we receive in. We have a hazardous waste disposal site that's in Mount Olive, out of our Mount Olive transfer station, where we accept household hazardous waste from the public. And we also have event days that we host around the county as well. And those event days are typically at the Morris County Public Safety Training Academy. We do some in Quantick, some in Chatham. We try to do them around the county so to provide regional coverage for residents to drop off household hazardous waste. We also do recycling services, collection services. We pick up material from depots, municipalities. We do about 14 towns right now currently where we pick up material from. We also have a bunch of businesses we pick up from, school districts. So we're pretty robust. We also do recycling education services, just like where we're coming to talk to you today, and provide environmental sustainability educational outreach. So we do a lot of different things. That's pretty impressive. So moving on to what you guys are really here to talk about is composting. What we have, as I had mentioned before, two vegetative waste sites that we accept in. The majority is our Morris County municipalities. And for the most part, we actually receive in almost all of Morris County's veg waste that's generated on a municipal sense. So if your leaves and grass are out on the curb, there's a good majority that a lot of that's coming to one of these two sites. The one is behind the Public Safety Training Academy in Parsippany, and the second one is actually in the International Trade Zone in Mount Olive. These two sites process materials into finished compost and mulch. That's actually sold out to Morris County residents, commercial businesses, and I'll get into the certifications that we have and some of the other stuff that we do, but we also provide that free to residents at each one of the sites. And a lot of residents actually take advantage of that, up to 2 cubic yards a year. So both of these sites hold what's called multi-class permits for B and C permits. That means that they accept leaves, grass, and tree parts. And in Mount Olive, that's particularly unique because we actually accept logs at that site only really from our county shade tree department. And we also take in lakeweed. So Lake Apacon, Lake Musconetcon, their lakeweed that gets pulled off of the lake actually goes to that site and gets composted. What we do there is, again, we compost the material. So grass and leaves are placed in windrows at a rate of about 1 cubic yard to every 30 cubic yards of leaves. That rate that we have there is then turned when the temperature reaches about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. To kill off any weed seeds and pathogens. You don't want to go any higher than that because you're going to kill off any of the good bacteria. And what happens is we're required to sample all of that before it goes out. So what'll happen around now is the grass that we're collecting in from the summer months, the spring, summer, and early fall months will get placed in different piles in accordance with our site permit. And then when the leaves come in, in early fall, late fall, and even into the winter time for those sites that stockpile them, they'll get placed into windrows. And then around April, May, it'll actually get made into a finished compost. So after it gets turned and moved around and chopped up. Before we can sell it again, that does have to get sampled. So the DEP mandates that everything has to be sampled before it goes out to meet certain criteria. On top of that, we actually tested with like 4 different other labs for different product certifications to make sure it adheres to different requirements, and we could sell that out to different end users. A lot of this has to do with businesses we send it out to. So in our Parsippany location, that's actually certified to our U.S. Composting Council seal of testing assurance. And in the Mount Olive site, that's actually tested under the Organics Materials Review Institute. So these 2 sites are being used for different things. The Parsippany site's compost is actually going out to do things like green roofs in the city, park projects, a lot of construction jobs that are utilizing the compost for different materials like stream bank restoration projects and stuff like that. It's pretty unique. And what's happening for the omri material, so that's the stuff in Mount Olive, that's actually going out for organic farms or people that's farmers or different sites that are looking for that certification to say that their material was made with organic compost. Yes.
Do you charge municipalities for this service, or do you
for the to accept in the materials? We don't pick up from anybody. To accept the material in, we do charge at different rates. There is a out-of-county rate, an in-county rate for municipalities, and there's also a business rate as well. So there's 3 different rates that we actually publicize. It's all on our website under the vegetative waste link that's there. And then the material that we sell out, you can either come and pick it up or we deliver it. Obviously, it's cheaper if you come and pick it up. But the material that is for free that I had mentioned is only for residents and only up to 2 cubic yards.
It's definitely at least several $100 a truckload to drop off the stuff. It's horrible.
Cheaper. Yeah. And we've had issues where like a contractor would come and pick up a whole bunch of stuff, and that's a separate issue. But if you're just a resident looking for your own product on your own lawn or around your house, it's definitely a nice service that we do provide free for Morris County residents. So this is just an example of our permit for Parsippany. So you can see the highlighted areas are what's actually being mandated that we have to test and what they're saying in accordance with our permit. And then you can see these are the sampling samples that we'll get back for the different product certifications. Again, these are just 2 of the sites. There's 2 others that we actually get things tested out at. So we're required again to test at the DEP approved lab. That has to be certified in certain criteria, and then the OMRI listing that we have has to be certified in one criteria, and the U.S. Composting Council that lab has to be certified in other criteria. But it's kind of funny that none of the labs all work together, so we have to get tested in multiple places. Yes, Larry.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Do you
Yeah.
know if we've ever failed in any of these
No.
sampling?
Yeah, we've never failed. Actually, it's a nice layout question. So you're asking a good point, because we do such a good job actually monitoring the material that comes in, and the municipalities do a wonderful job of ensuring that the material that's being brought in is actually in good quality. We do have very strict standards at these sites, so our guys are sticklers for the material that's coming in. So if they see that something's contaminated or it doesn't look right, they'll load it right back up on the truck that dropped it off, and they'll send it right away and send it someplace else. And they'll actually fill out a form. The forms I created a while ago, they'll actually send it back with the municipality and keep a record on file if they've actually sent it away, in case, there's an issue. Say somebody dumps it down the road, which we've had that happen once before. Somebody illegally dumped something that we didn't accept. So, but yeah, we've never failed. If we did have to fail, we'd have to figure out criteria to make sure that the material is, okay. We've had material come in from other sites that failed, And then we also put in strict requirements for making sure that it wouldn't fail. So, for example, there was a location that brought us in lakeweed that was picking up lakeweed from a part of the lake that had hazardous material that was in with the lakeweed. They actually failed from the location that they were bringing it to. So they were looking for another site to drop it off at. They didn't want to have to throw it away in the garbage and landfill it. So they were still looking to make sure that it was able to be composted. So part of that problem was we were requiring them to test the material that came in from different parts of that lake and make sure that we could accept what was required and then throw away the stuff that was failing out of compliance. So we worked with them to try and come up with a solution to recycle as much as we could and throw away things that were not able to be composted and then would affect our compost that we sell and we would fail. So good question.
I mean, just, and hopefully not, let's talk about this on the next slide, not stepping on it.
Yeah.
One of the things we don't do that most commercial sites like us do is we don't accept any dimensional lumber, like anything that's not from a tree, anything growing naturally. So, you know, most other places will be accepting wood waste, you know, from construction, and, you know, that's where you really get in trouble with the composting. You don't know what's going to be in the so. One of the difficult things about running a compost facility when it's only natural wood waste and everyone wants to get rid of it for free, it's only leaves, it's, you know, beautiful, glorious stuff, but costs a lot to process, test, sell, sample, pay people to talk about, and so, but keeping construction debris out of it, I think is a big part of the creating good composting line.
And what Larry's saying is a good point. We're not accepting the lumber or pallets, which a lot of people would do. And pallets would be one of the things that they would take because it soaks up the dye so well. So if you're looking for colorized mulch, you would look to bring in pallets. And that's something that you'll probably see all over the place. Oh, 3 pallets, 3 pallets, 3 pallets. Well, they'll take those pallets in, but then you got to consider also the metals that are in there. So the nails, the, you know, all the chemicals that might be on all those pallets.
Where those pallets come from.
Yeah, exactly. So there's issues that come with those things. And there's also different types of mulch that you could sell as well. So there's specialized criteria and certifications for playground mulch if you're looking for that. So you have to make sure you fall in the guidelines you're looking to do. And again, we do a very good job of monitoring what comes in. We've done waste audits at the sites to make sure that what's being delivered to us is actually clean, and we produce those reports back and give them back to the municipality, providing them feedback on ways that could help clean up the streams that are there. Veg waste is one of those things vegetative waste is one of those things you don't consider as much. It should really be considered for vegetative recycling. When we did audits of our own materials coming in, that was probably 3 fall seasons ago, I did one, and we were coming in and finding like, okay, this one location had all this lawn, like lawn ornaments and stuff like that. Well, vegetative waste could think in their minds like, oh, okay, I put in the solar lights, I put in rocks, I put in all kinds of things that were on my lawn, you know. Or you'll see a lot of times the grass that comes in, it might be a landscaper that just mowed somebody's lawn in their backyard, but picked up all the dog toys that were back there, the kids' toys, and you see a lot of that stuff on the back end. Same thing as when they have, say somebody's doing lawn work, you'll see a lot of times seed bags, lawn and fertilizer bags, gloves, water bottles. These are all things that you'll see a lot of. And a lot of that has to do with understanding where the whole process is involved. So understanding what happens to your material when it gets picked off the curb and how that process actually takes place and what the end product is. So there's a lot of education that needs to go into that.
How do you deal with this stuff when stuff just ends up in your?
There we go. So what happens is, as I was saying before, we put everything into windrows, right? And it's at that rate that's there. So this is an example of how we turn everything. So this is a, see if you can hear it. Can you?
Yeah, well,
It's working? Okay. So this is our windrow, our scarab windrow turn. So as you can see, I can probably get out and run around the site probably 20 times before this is done. It's very slow go. It's probably about, our windrows take about, with this machine, 25, so I can feedback. Takes about 25 minutes to actually have this go through a whole row, 25 minutes.
How long's the route?
I don't know, what do you say?
80
What-
yards?
8
Half
yards?
a football or 50 yards? Half a football?
Part of it, a half of a football field. So it takes a long time for that to go through. We actually did purchase newer equipment, a Comtech windrow turner. It was probably about 3 years old right about now. We used DEP grants to replace actually this machine at this location through the Clean Air Act. There was a grant that they had through the Volkswagen settlement. So they allowed us to do 30% up to for the purchase of a new machine. The DEP would give us back through a grant. So we actually did replace it. So it probably goes through there in about 15 minutes now.
So is that steam or diesel coming out?
That's steam because it could be. But that is actually steam. That's because the rows are so hot. But just a small example of how that whole process goes through on a larger scale. Alternatively,
And where's that facility?
that's our Mount Olive facility. This is actually our Parsippany facility. So what's happening here is they're grinding up leaves for composting. So they're bringing them into a smaller scale. So one, they'll fit into the rows a little bit better so we can bring in more material. Our Parsippany site gets hammered in the fall, looking for people to find a place to dispose of, recycle their leaves properly. So we try and do what we can, what's allowed in our permit to accept what we can. But pretty much 4 municipalities alone fill up this site before the end of the season. And a lot of
Parsippany, it's right behind the police academy, the safety training academy, where that site is.
yeah, and because they actually cut the leaves down so much by grinding it, the material at this site winds up is ready faster than the material that's at Mount Olive. So there's a lot of things that have to do with it, but this is just a small example of.
I would say mostly Morris County.
Yes,
The biggest customer at this site.
and Randolph.
And
Let's speed that up. What was the question?
How do you keep the dog toys from being in there? Dog toys, the other stuff you mentioned.
That's the unfortunate reality, is that you could do the education on the back end. We have had a lot of, public releases that we've done, education, a lot of digital media that we've tried to put in place. I even have a flyer that shows how to properly prepare your vegetative waste. We've actually developed signage A-frames that we've delivered to a lot of the municipalities to try and help out for material that's getting delivered there at the site and being brought to us so that they understand what actually goes in there. Instead of a municipality just having a bin that doesn't have a label on it and seeing what the next person brought in, they now also have the signage that's there that tells you what's acceptable and unacceptable.
But we also, on the back end of our product, we do screen and we pay for, oh, I'm sorry.
Is there that?
No, good, no.
But
What,
before you go there,
yeah,
is the leaves campaign making any dent in how much leaves are coming to you?
well, I mean, so we'll still accept them in, and to the point where we fill up the capacity.
Yeah, but these campaigns to stop sending them off your property, leave them there.
Oh, I see what you mean. Leaves where they are.
That's not taking it.
Yeah, no, you can only tell somebody to, cut it and leave their grass so much, and that's the very difficult reality of a lot of that is, you would have to cut it a lot and quite frequently to take advantage of something like that. Some of the towns, if you have a landscaper, the landscaper will bring them to us as well. The towns, the municipalities have stormwater requirements that will only allow leaves to be on the curb for so long. You know, some locations will require you to put them in containers, other ones tell you to bring it to depot. So it's there's mixed messaging every municipality that you go to, which is fine. And a lot of the municipalities do a very good job of educating their residents on what to do. But it's very difficult from municipality to municipality to, you know, rein them all in. But that waste audit I was referencing before, we did provide suggestions and ways to help their residents. So the information that might have been on their website, how they could improve that to get the correct information out. So as you were saying, like things that we do to try and make sure that contaminants might not be in those materials that are getting delivered to us, we do screen everything on the back end. Now, we found that the lawn and leaf bags are a major contaminant, you know, for people throwing in things that might not be accepted. You know, so we try and educate in that particular realm. But this is our Parsippany site that you're seeing these pictures of. Because we don't accept the bags at this location, and because a lot of the residents are allowed in the towns that are dropping this off to put their material out on the curb line, the material that's coming to us is pretty clean. But the material that's being brought in other ways, like let's say in a depot container that might not be something that we see all the time, maybe out of county, we're finding that there is more contamination there. And it's not so much that too. You'll see that pretty much anywhere. If a container was used for another purpose, let's say at the municipality's depot, say it was used for trash, they might not clean out the container, and the bottom of the container might have something. It might also happen in a town where the leaves are out on the curb, and we've seen plows, we've seen I had bowling balls in one. I don't know, people are throwing out tons of bowling balls. I mean, there's like crazy things that you see. But in the end, everything regardless gets placed through a screener. So we do screen both sites, and this is just an example of how the screening process works. This is in the very beginning of the screener coming in. We're trying to figure out how to gauge it the right way so that we get a lot of material out and we don't have to rescreen everything. But as you can see, this goes through a trommel screen, which will kind of loop around. The material will fall through the holes and go through a back end here, conveyor belt, and then that's the clean material coming out. Again, this is just the beginning of us trying to tweak it so that we get the majority of the good material through here and we don't have to rescreen. So just showing you how that screening process works. Yeah, it does. So these are some of the things you see. So right there, fertilizer bag was in there, right? That's the inside of the screen. That's you know, turning around all the material, and you could see that picture there is actually all of the contaminants that are piling up. In fact, for perspective, I would say that that's probably as large as the ceiling. That's how big that pile is, and that's probably half the site. So there's a lot of contaminants that go through there. Now, it's not so much you know, garbage per se. It could also be larger woody debris that hasn't broken down yet. There might be some things that might not fit through the screens. They're about 1-inch screens. Sometimes we do a finer screen so that we capture better material. Depends on what we're looking for in the job specific that we're trying to, you know, have that compost sold to. But I mean, it's pretty, as Larry had said, it's pretty expensive. I think one year we had spent about $28,000 at this site alone, just in disposal costs for tailings. So when you weigh that in, it's a lot of money. And that cost, just like anything else, if you think about applying to recycling, or you think about applying it to other means, it actually, the user of that who now has to dispose of it. So a municipality might have to cover those costs. So if the municipality or the business or whoever could do their due diligence to try and make sure that it's a cleaner product that's coming in, we might not have to charge to recoup those costs as much. So, you know, everybody's working in the right direction. You want to make, you know, you always want to make sure of that.
25 years ago, we weren't screening. I don't think the world was as much of a dump as it is today, you know, without they have as much disposable plastic. Yeah, I mean, they have 97 dog toys a month per dog owner.
And it's just interesting because dog toys are one. I mean, you see hoses, you'll see, rakes, you'll see, what's a good one? The sprinkler heads. You see a lot of that, so they're all things that you would find in a lawn and, a lot of times your landscaper isn't gonna go walk around and go pick that stuff up.
But we also get a billion water bottles.
And that's the other thing, you get a lot of water bottles because nobody wants to take the time to, dispose of that properly if there's a bag right in front of them. They have to understand, as we had said before, we want to make sure that they understand where all that material goes and to understand the end use for that material.
Chair.
Correct. So this is another example. This is how we grind all of our logs for mulch. This is at the Mount Olive facility. So we use a Diamond Z screen, and basically all these logs are actually split, and then they go through this large machine and get processed.
That's actually about what's in the
There you go. So it takes a long time. If you can imagine, we have to let this sit now afterwards and let this cool off for a little bit. Because that's probably 2 logs split up. I mean, we've had an issue where we've gotten it so hot where there has been the potential for a fire. This machine actually has caught on fire before. This is actually a shared services agreement we have with another municipality. So this machine alone, this is over $1 million. So this is a very expensive process that we run. And, we do a service to the municipalities to make sure that there is an outlet. And Morris County is very unique that it has a lot of different facilities and outlets for different things. Something we call comprehensive waste management, where we're trying to make sure that there are outlets for a lot of things that can be recycled, and vegetative waste as well. And we do so in a manner where we're typically cheaper than most of our competitors. So that's just that. And then, as I was saying before, this is one of the other small things that we do. This is the material delivery services that we have. So we do deliver mulch and compost, unscreened compost, and screened compost, wood chips that we bring in, that we get brought in. We'll actually deliver that out for people looking for, like, say, a trail maintenance or something like that. We'll deliver that. But the mulch seems to be something that a lot of the residents look for, and it's all natural. So it's not dyed. It's what gets brought in just from those logs that get cut off the road by our shade tree department, get put in that machine, and the mulch gets sent out. So, yeah. So that's my presentation. Maura's just going to talk a little bit on composting operations.
Yeah.
There you go, Maura.
Oh.
I gotta share.
I'm sure this.
Yep.
So, yeah, I guess I'm gonna be talking mainly about how to compost yourself. As Anthony said, running a larger scale composting site for vegetative material, expensive, a lot goes into it. It's better if you could do it yourself. I know a lot of people in the room, but a lot of people, go with a landscaper nowadays, so you may not want to go and get your hands dirty and do all this, but it's very important to do, especially also relating to food waste, which we're also going to next speaker is going to talk about. Does anyone here compost already? Oh, wow. So you guys
Everybody in the audience.
But hopefully
Maybe not.
it just inspires you to keep going, or maybe you'll learn some new things about it. One thing I wanted to mention before starting is, focus on just kind of how to manage the process of composting, but relating to food scraps composting, it's really one of the better options for managing food scraps in New Jersey right now because you can either go with collection service, which I think we're going to talk about next, or you can compost in your backyard. That's really the only options we have currently. The DEP has very, strict permit. There's one type of permit you could do for food waste. Lots of requirements. So if you wanted to run like a small scale community composting site that, a lot of people think about when they think about composting, that's actually really hard to do in New Jersey. You'd have to go get the whole solid waste permit in order to do that. So we'd like to, I think that's going to change soon, so that, that might happen. But right now, backyard composting is really one of the best things you can do to deal with your food scraps, but it's limited in certain ways. So we'll talk about that a bit.
And not just, if you mind,
Yeah.
just interject, I mean, that's something that Maura was saying, just the permitting rules is something we even looked into for our Mount Olive site. If we were going to look to accept food waste and the amount of current permits you'd have to get for an outdoor site like that, you'd have to be required to get stormwater permits, air permits, a special class permit for solid waste. So a research, get an RD&D permit, which would cost us almost $100,000 with 3 different permits, and it wouldn't be cost effective, and they don't make it easy. So we did go on a stakeholder meeting that was last week, but it seems like that's still kind of far away in the DEP sides, although they are at least looking into it. And having a stakeholder meeting is one of the things in the right direction. So just wanted to mention that.
So as you all know, because you all compost, I wanted to just mention also, in addition to diverting food waste, preventing food waste, the finished compost is also extremely valuable. That's why people spend a lot of money buying it. You can make it yourself, but it's extremely valuable. It increases your soil fertility. It helps plant health, and improves the soil structure, increases water retention, and it can even act as a carbon sink. So it has a lot of benefits in addition to the food waste diversion. And our soils are not in good shape, so it's important to keep that in mind as well. So composting, we're talking about terminology. We all know decomposition is kind of the natural process of organic materials breaking down, but composting is kind of the human-aided version of that, where we're creating the conditions where decomposition is going to happen efficiently, create a nice end product that we're looking for. And it's specifically in aerobic conditions. So that means with the presence of oxygen. When we're looking at maybe a collection, a food waste collection, some of those aren't always going to a composting facility. Some of them are going to a digester facility, an anaerobic digester, which is a different process than composting. And so it's important to make those distinctions, but it's still a way of managing food waste. And eventually the digestate from that might get composted. But there's a big distinction between the two.
And what's the difference between that?
So anaerobic is without oxygen, and often there is a biogas capture from that process, because the reason we don't like food waste or organics in our landfills, the reason why, vegetative waste is banned from going to land or going through the solid waste disposal, is because it releases methane, because in a landfill, you're trapping, all the oxygen out, and with that lack of oxygen, it's creating methane. And so anaerobic digesters are kind of using that to capture a gas to use for, an energy source. And then you're left over with some material, and that can either be composted next or goes to another process. A lot of the facilities in New Jersey that are accepting food waste are not composting, they're anaerobic digesters, but we do send out of state as well. Some of the haulers do send out of state. So, creating the suitable conditions for your decomposers, that's all your bacteria, your insects, your fungi, all of those helpful organisms that are gonna make the decomposition process happen. Your job as a composter is managing the conditions, the moisture, the oxygen, the nutrients to make that happen. So a good ratio of brown material, which is our carbon-rich material, to our green material or nitrogen-rich material. It's not always associated with the color. That's just the common terminology, although brown, the browns or the carbon-rich dried dead leaves, wood chips, you know, tree parts, straw, wood shavings, they're kind of brown, but when you go into the greens category, the nitrogen rich, it could be all. So that's something that comes up. But you want your ratio to be 3 or 4 parts carbon material to 1 part nitrogen. The reason I say 3 to 4, because if you're composting with food waste, you want to kind of be heavier on the carbon versus if you're just doing grass and garden trimmings, you can go a little bit lighter on the browns, because grass, I'll get to a slide that'll show you the different materials, but with grass, it's nitrogen, your leaves are carbon, so if you're going with just the yard waste, you can go a little easier. Let's see, and it's good to always mix those ingredients before adding them to your pile, because then it makes sure that those decomposers have easy access to the nutrients in those materials that they need to operate effectively. So the carbons are what's providing kind of the sugars, the energy, just like, you know, carbohydrates for humans. And then nitrogen is allows them to synthesize proteins. So they kind of need that good balance. Moisture level, they need to be able to kind of use moisture to get on the surfaces of all the material. But if there's too much moisture, that means there's less air. And so you have to balance your moisture levels as well. This last point, cap your pile with brown ingredients. So once you've mixed everything together, you put it in your pile. It's good to cap it off with either a finished compost or a heavy layer of your brown material, big layer of dry leaves, so that you're avoiding odors, and especially if you're composting food scraps, you're avoiding pests like rodents, which you really don't. So these are just some examples. You can compost lots of things, but these are some of the common materials that you'll be adding in, and you know, your composter. The eggshells are actually not a carbon, they're more adding minerals, but you know, they're a good one to add, because people produce, you know, they cook at home, you're gonna have eggshells that you can throw in there. What I don't have a slide of is what to avoid. Anything that's really not a plant-based material, so no meat, no bones, no oils or dairy. Those are really important because it will smell and you will attract pests with those materials. Also, there's sometimes confusion about compostable bags, compostable packaging with, you know, some kind of label that indicates it might be compostable or decomposable. So those tend to not work well in a backyard compost because it's not reaching the temperatures and the conditions that would really break that material down. And if you've ever tried to throw one of those plastic compostable bags in, it actually really interferes with your ability to turn the material and mix it all in. So that's also a problem. I think Larry.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yeah.
I guess I always have this argument for,
Yeah.
don't know. Cooked stuff that isn't with oils or anything, let's say it's steamed.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Then you're good.
Right.
Yeah.
like a corn cob husk, for instance.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fine, right?
Yeah, as long as there was no oil.
It's on the list.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Like steamed
You said
rice.
corn cob, it's actually.
Oh,
It takes Yeah,
I keep those out, it takes forever.
I do the same.
Yeah,
So-
I heard that take forever too.
So that brings me kind of to the next point. It's not, sometimes it's good to have some of those larger materials in there, like something that might take longer, like a corn cob or a pine cone or larger pieces of sticks, because it actually, it's affecting the bulk density. So it's eliminating the scenario where everything's gonna get compacted, where there's gonna be limited oxygen in there. So it actually can sometimes be good to have a good mixture. You don't want it to be too fine, but you do want it to be small enough, like between, so if you have big pieces of material that you're throwing in there, it's good to break them down, like 2 inches, you know, a little smaller than that. Size-wise would be good. And you can always sift out those bigger pieces at the end of the process, and creating those air pockets will help the decomposers in the process.
Also, when you're using compost for a garden, you want to make sure you avoid weeds, otherwise the weeds will spread.
Yeah, so so that's a good point. For a pile size to maintain the heat, that's gonna get up to the levels where you're killing weeds, seeds and pathogens, which some recommendations are like up to 151 degrees. A backyard pile tends to be small, so it may not reach those temperatures. So throwing weed seeds in there, weeds may just cause you to have, be spreading weeds all over your garden once you're using that finished. Same thing for tomato seeds are extremely resilient. They will, and that's when you get your volunteer tomatoes popping up, because they survived the compost pile, and then you spread it back out. So tomato seeds, weed seeds, and then of course pathogens.
I think what you had mentioned too is like even the compostable like cutlery.
Oh,
you'll
yeah,
see,
yeah.
That's a good point too, is because a lot of that you'll see might say like compostable or whatever, but they're really intended, if it's saying it's compostable, you have to read it to see whether or not it's compostable in an in-vessel unit or in an actual industrial facility. So that's commonly something that people, misconstrue all the time, where it's like, oh, it's compostable, it might be home compostable. No, that's mentioned solely for the fact that if you're bringing it to a facility, but if you're bringing it to a facility that's, able to compost on an industrial scale, that doesn't really exist. Again, there's only 2 locations that do that in New Jersey, with the third being one that's on that RD&D permit. So there's only really 3 places in the whole state that do that, unless again you're willing to bring it out of state. But again, your material has to get to those locations. So just going in a vegetative waste bin,
Truck has to drive there.
you're not going to get there. So there's a lot of greenwashing, per se, that you have to be very careful about what's going. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. Let's see. So I did talk about maintaining moisture in your pile, but so I'll just talk about a good test you can do. If you just take a scoopful with your hand and you squeeze it, if it's kind of like a damp sponge texture consistency, then you're good. If it's dripping water out, then that's going to be too wet, and you're going to want to balance that out with some dry brown materials, like some dry leaves or something. And if it feels less wet, and if it feels crumbly or dry, you're going to want to, you can even take a hose and water it. You just want to go the time. Or food scraps are fairly heavy in moisture, so if you plan on adding in more food scraps, you got it stockpiled, you can do that. You can also adjust the shape of your pile to help capture moisture versus shed moisture if you have more of a pile setup, but we'll get into, there's lots of different types of systems to set up your pile. This is just kind of a standing pile. This is, wood pallet pile, but we'll show those next. This is just about oxygen, which I touched on. But one of the biggest things to maintain oxygen in your pile is turning it regularly. So that means, it depends on what type of system you have. If you have just a tip, traditional pile. You just gotta get your pitchfork out and do some turning, try to get oxygen in there, especially that stuff that's on the bottom, that's gonna be the most compacted. It's a lot more oxygen in there. Some people have those kind of standing barrel style ones where you can just hand crank it, which is, so it depends, but you really want to be turning it regularly, especially if you are composting with food scraps. You're going to have to do that more regularly. So for food scraps, about every 3 days. For yard waste, you can do it less. And it also depends on how quickly you want your pile to decompose. With food scraps, you kind of want it to get pretty active because you don't want that stuff sitting around. But some people like to just leave their yard waste there to kind of take their time with it. But if you turn it more often, it will be more active. It'll reach higher temperatures. Let's see. All right, what size should your pile be? So I think I mentioned, the small piles stop, larger piles get hotter. A good size to go for is like 3 feet by 3 feet. But again, if you don't have that many people in your household, you don't have a lot of material that you're throwing in there, you might not be able to reach that. Or you might not, have the time and dedication to be able to manage all of that. So it's okay to start small with what you have. All right, so these are a couple different types of composting systems. We got our wood composting bin here on the right. Those typically you kind of start adding on one side, and then as you're turning, you flip it over into the other pile. So you can kind of start 2 different piles going at once to manage the different stages. Over on the bottom, you've got your tumbler. Some people just do a wire mesh, chicken wire pile, especially if it's just with yard waste. You could make one out of an old pickle jar or an old garbage can. There's lots of ways to do it. You don't have to go out and buy a fancy composter. They're available if you want it to be easy. Let's see. These are just a couple others.
I asked everyone just what they do at home
Yeah.
for 10 seconds.
3 foot open pile. And I have one of those rolling bins that I paid much more for than $16.
This one's like a little one.
Over my fence in my backyard, I've got like some cinder blocks. I created a couple of bunkers in, and I just have a pile.
Oh, and I should say, with mine, I have 2 of them, so that I have the ones that are cooking and the ones that are active.
Yeah, I have cinder blocks. My problem is my yard has lots of trees, so no matter what I do, the roots just push up into them. I mean, it's crazy. And then I have another one that's a square box with a chicken wire that I turn.
Home compost, I don't use that.
Mhm.
I think I have one of those earth machines,
Okay.
but I don't think I bought it at Mountain Lakes, and then, when I think one morning was doing,
Yeah, sometimes municipalities will do a sale.
I definitely didn't.
I think the one that they have is like $89.
Okay.
If it's around what that is, what they do the earth machine with. There's a company that some municipalities partner with, and that's a sale. And I think the Home Depot one.
It was very reasonable.
Plus.
Yeah, Costco has them too. Early in the season, they're pretty reasonable, under $100 bucks. I mean, nice.
We did composting for Hanover, we developed their machines. Oh, nice.
Great.
What is their machine?
Yeah, it's pretty fairly simple.
Bottom or something.
Yeah.
A bottom that's got holes in it, but it basically sits on it so that the worms can come up, and then it just has the size of your pile. I think the lid to kind of fasten it.
Yeah, the lid screws on and it's got the holes on either side to aerate it, and then you press this up and then the compost falls out.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's something similar to the other machine, except I have a lid that opens up, but I also have and on the side another one for yard waste, just with wire mesh around. So that's where I get the nitrogen, the leaves collect there and just dump it in there. That's like how I mix them up.
Yeah, great, yeah, it's good to save stockpile of your leaves so that you have your. What I didn't talk about was worm composting. There's a whole other world of worm composting, which you can do indoors. But it's, you want to, you probably need to purchase some red worms. Those are the specific type of worms, the earthworms that you know, the night crawlers that you might, how, you know, or not.
Wouldn't it smell?
So if you want to add a lot of bedding, so if you use paper or leaves, but you want to add a lot of those because they go through that really fast. There's certain things that worms like better than other, you know, you kind of see what the worms like in terms of your food scraps, but they'll get through it. And so usually, you know, you have a bin with layers, you can make one or buy one. And you start at the top, you have some bedding, you throw the food scraps in there, and then there's holes, and it kind of, as the worms eat the material and passes through them, you got your worm castings, and they fall through down to the bottom. Sometimes it'll accumulate some water too, but that's fine. The water actually just really deep in the nutrients from the compost, so you can take that and put it into your garden. Be tending to use that. You can do worm composting indoors.
Maura, I think I heard there's an invasive jumping worm coming. Have you heard anything about that? No.
I've heard of this, but I don't know a lot about it.
Yeah.
I like.
Sometimes I wonder if I'm
In
seeing that in my
passing.
time. But I don't see them jumping. So that-
No, I don't know the answer to that.
Friends who did themselves to compost experts and made it
Okay.
composting.
Mhm.
And then they saw my system. And they then
I was very proud.
Yeah, I think worm composting, you're not gonna process as much material, partially because the worms don't really want it to get hot. They're more at that cooler temperature level. They're gonna leave if it gets too hot, or they try to leave. If you're indoors, if they can't, and they're contained, they can't leave. But if your pile gets too hot, they're gonna leave. So they're more of a filter for, you know, not a lot of material. So this talks a little bit about the hot system versus the cold system, which I talked a bit about. So this is just a placement for your compost bin if you're putting it outside. It's good to keep it a little bit further away from the house, especially doors and windows, especially from your kitchen or garden where then, you know, potential pests might have access to other food sources. You can put it in the sun or the shade. That might play a role in the speed of the, you know, the process, but it can be done in either one. You can place it directly on the soil so that, you know, worms can migrate in there, but you can also do it in a contained or even paved surface. It can be done, and keep away from roots and trees and shrubs. These are so.
question is that, so maggots, I've had maggots in my compost.
Maggots are fine.
Okay.
Yeah, maggots are fine. They're just part of the ecosystem of the compost pile. But if
Open up your pile and you're like,
yeah,
there's a life cycle of flies, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
yeah,
No, it's there.
Just means that your piles work.
yeah, like if they're really, like, you can just turn it more often, then the fly won't be as attracted to the food, rotting food, and they're not gonna, you know, like, you know, it's okay now.
And we really care about the animals. Like,
Do,
I don't know, I see
Wait.
rabbits all over my yard and,
well, yes, because you don't want rats and mice. And I'll talk a little bit about how to prevent rats and mice, but they spread harmful diseases. They'll poop in the compost and it will be unusable. They'll burrow in there and it'll be unusable. So for that reason, I would say it's good to be aware of the wildlife, but it's just always good to be monitoring who is stopping.
I mean, rabbit's just a big mouse, isn't it?
They're herbivores, so their poop has way less pathogens. Like rabbit poop is not gonna have the same disease, capacity as like rat poop and mouse poop.
But you want to be mindful that you want to be mindful that there is things like that you might look out for, like a rat burrow that might be next to your compost pile. Because making sure that you're protecting your compost pile is very important, because essentially, if you do it incorrectly, you're providing a harborage for and that could lead to other issues and the town or somebody else getting involved into an issue that could happen. I've seen that on the health department side where we've had to get involved in things like that, as a municipal code violation. So just things to be mindful of.
You want to manage your pile well, especially food waste, because it's just it's gonna avoid that. And we want more people to be composting, so we don't want neighbors complaining and shutting you down and, things like that.
So it's right on the borderline, probably.
No.
But it sounds like none of you guys would have that issue, because you're actually being active with your compost bins.
So this is just some troubleshooting. I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the pests as well. So in terms of your placement, like I said before, away from food source, away from a garbage can, away from somewhere where they might get, away from a bird feeder. Also, it's a good idea. It's as a preventative measure, especially if you're in a more urban environment, even though you might not get as much worm activity, putting on a solid barrier because they can't burrow under there is important. If you want to go a step down from that, you still want those worms in there, you can have a very strong hardware mesh under there, but rats can chew through that if they are very motivated. So you just want to be careful, and again, always monitor for rat holes, burrows, and keeping clearance around, and not keeping like a brush pile right nearby, giving them a nice place to make a home. But rats, they don't like to be out in the open as much, so keeping it clear. So other troubleshooting, if the pile is just not very active, it's good to just add more material. Bigger, it's bigger, it's gonna maintain those temperatures, especially add a little bit more greens. If it's too soggy, you wanna amend that with some drier materials. If your worms are leaving, that might mean it's too hot, so, or it's just, not comfortable for them, so they need, like I said, like bedding, newspaper. If it smells, that's an indication that there's not enough air in there. So you can do a few things to figure out what the reason for not having enough air is, but usually it's just a combination of things. Turn it more often, add more brown materials, make sure that there's good drainage, that sort of thing. And then also just make sure you have the right balance of the that we started out last time. Yeah.
You mentioned burrows on the lawn. Are those always rodents?
So I'm just thinking of one particular experience I had where they make holes under the pile, or you have like a nice patio stone, they like that hard roof, they'll just make a hole right under there. In the lawn, I wouldn't necessarily say it's definitely a rat, but if you're seeing holes like that around the pile or immediate vicinity, then I would start to take a closer look and make sure.
I'd say if you were looking at something, see that as a circle as a reference, that's about the size of what a rat would burrow. You would see that in the lawn, and you'd see maybe one or two. that's gonna reference that there is a rodent that's actually there. Chipmunk would do something smaller. Squirrel would be even smaller than, would be just as small because it's looking for something it might have buried. Moles are another thing that you might see, but you'd see mounds in the lawn. So there's different types of pests that would burrow there. But generally, you're gonna see any type of a rat. You might even see a mouse. I mean, in my compost pile that I actually had like a butternut squash seeds that I had buried in the garden. And they had found that overnight. And then I saw a actual rat burrow in my garden. So, I mean, just something as simple as that, they'll find it and, you know, it's very easy, but you'll see it and you'll notice that it's there. If you try and brush it over again, and if they peel it back open, you'll know if it's active or not and what it is.
And again, if you have like a contained system, like one of those tumblers, or even you could have those box, style 3-bin system. If it has a lid that closes and you're really minimizing or eliminating their ability to access it, then they're not going to stick around. So it's important to, and keep turning the pile, because if you keep disturbing them, they're not necessarily going to stay unless they moved it.
I'm kind of lazy about like my compost. I won't I'll put it on my garden bed before it's like soil consuming. And I have seen, so it's conceivable that there are seeds in there or something like that, pumpkin seeds or something.
It could be something even more than a rat or something like that. Could be a bird, could be another animal looking for it. So I just so happen to know what that was. So, but yeah, I mean, you want to try and prevent a harborage for pests. So always keep that in mind. No piles of things that are just out in the open if you can help it. Making sure, as Maura had said, to turn it constantly and provide a presence. That when you leave things and you leave it unmonitored, that's when you could have that type of an issue.
How to use your food. So how to use your compost. Once your compost is not heating up anymore and it's really broken down, you know that it's kind of getting close. You can sift it out. You can make your own sifter if you like. Hardware, I'm sure you can buy them too. Sift it out. You'll have a nice, fine, dark compost. You can do further testing, easy testing at home to make sure it's like fully finished, although usually it's okay to use, but if you're producing it for commercial use or something, you definitely want to test it. But some simple things you can do is just leave it and see if it heats up again. That means it might still be active. You can do a little Ziploc bag test where if you put it in a Ziploc bag and you seal it, a couple days later and you open it, if it smells like ammonia, it might still be active. Or you can even just do a simple test, take like a pot and put some fast germinating type of seeds like beans and put them in, and if they all germinate or the majority of them germinate, then it's great, it's done. If they're not doing so, right. So those are just some easy tests you can do to see it. And then just making sure you're storing it nicely in like a breathable container where it's not going to be moisture. And we actually have a flyer over there that shows different ways of incorporating compost into garden beds or potting soil, as well as mulch, because that's something we put out for our own compost and mulch. So if you're interested in how to best use your finished compost, take a look at that as well.
Those are the 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, so they're stapled together.
And that's it. Enjoy it.
Thanks, Anthony. Okay, and next we have Nadia Mian from Hanover Township. Yeah, sit there and I'll share my screen with your presentation. You can tell me going to change. Okay,
Nadia Mian, apologize, I'm share that one, the presentation. So let's talk very casually. Thank you. Yeah, I think more that was great. That was so comprehensive, awesome. Thank you so much for all that information. So I kind of be composting at home, but then also calling how to be a lazy composter, which is pretty much how I've been trained. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about, my background, and this is more like a layperson, way of calling things. To feel my experience, that was needed, and different kind of home compost models, like, on site at home, kind of the work done. Also, pick up like private companies that will come and pick up new models, and then some municipal ones that have started in New Jersey, where again, companies have sites or job off site, or still don't come pick it up. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that, how to be a community composter. So I'll talk a little about how to compost at home, and different models, and what kind of, what does that process change. So what materials are compostable? Again, like mostly, onions, vegetables, fruit, any kind of fruit, waste, tea bags, tea leaves, coffee grounds, eggshells, flowers, leaves, lines, stuff. It depends on, when you start going into, when you start going into different companies, they may take things like bones and meat. I even heard some taking like, petrol pads, like things like that kind of nature, but it really depends on the company. So I know some companies who pick up will take meat and dairy and bones, but other companies will not. You really have to ask the company and where they're taking that compost, if they have the kind of digesters that can work with that material or not. So, what materials are composted, again, it can be, you depend on who's doing it and how they're So my experience with composting started about, 4 years ago. So in the year 2000, I was born and raised in Toronto. And so in 2000, Toronto Environmental Alliance and the Canadian Union of Public Employees proposed a green bin program to pick up, organic waste to the city council. This was because there was a new garbage dump that was being proposed for out of mine. It created huge political kerfuffle. They're like, okay, well, how can we divert some of that, garbage to out of mine? And they're like, well, why don't we, take out some of the organic waste, and that'll make less waste that's going to the landfill. And so that's kind of the political origins of how the green bin program started. And so it was the first green bin program in North America. It did not actually have and offices, restaurants, and businesses, they don't separate or get waste on the part of small business collection. But most single family homes are part of the composting program. And so it's not just in the city of Toronto, but also municipalities that are surrounding in the Greater Toronto area, which is connected with Mississauga, in the different regions. And so everyone in the area that know that everything is program. And so usually what happens is that you'll get to the next slide. So everyone will get these for free. So you get the little yellow kind of beige bucket goes on the countertop, and we'll collect all the, your daily kind of organic food waste. And they do take bones, and they do take dairy, and they do take meat. So you can also put those in there. And then the green color bin, most people have in their garage. We still have in Toronto, so we still have this. And so, put all the daily clippings in there, and then when it gets full, we'll take it and put it into the green bin. And they do have the compostable bags. And there's specific bags that you must have. So you can't just use any bag, like it has to be the specific bag that you use, and they won't take it. And so then the bags will go into the green bin, and then you're recycling your garbage, and the green bin is picked up on the same day. And so what they've also done though is for garbage, for your garbage transfer, you're only allowed that one. transfer. And in some municipalities, you're actually only even allowed one bag of garbage. That's it. If there's more than one bag of garbage, they won't let you take it. And you have to get tagged and you pay extra trash because you should be recycling and you should be. And so that's kind of done there. And so,
This is in Toronto?
I'm sorry,
It is in Toronto?
Toronto, yeah. Toronto and the greater
Anyway,
Toronto area.
okay.
The city of Toronto.
And I apologize, how were you involved with that, that whole program?
Just at the record.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's what you.
Yeah, so I was not involved in the cruise never or anything, just as a regular, yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
So this is just a different composting model. So there's, I'm over on site, like more explained, which I'm over again, which is back with Dr. Stuff. There's private programs. So there's, this is where you're responsible again for storing the waste, but also discussing with the private company beforehand what they will and will not take. Companies sometimes will provide you with the bin. There's no backyard composter needed. You can schedule pickups with them and they will come to your home and pick up the waste material. You may or may not receive compost material in the end. And again, there's trade-offs, right? Like you have to think, is this really being environmentally friendly? Someone's coming to drive waste right home, then drive it somewhere else to have it, process. Is that really like kind of netting out your environmental, so there's, that's up to the individual thing to think about. Municipal programs, so, in New Jersey, there's a bunch of municipalities now that are also looking to do compost programs for homes. Again, I think Anthony mentioned composting in New Jersey is a hot mess, unintended. It would be much more environmentally friendly and sustainable. Smaller sites could exist within municipalities, but the EP is so siloed that it's impossible to just, go through all that bureaucracy and administration to get these things going. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. So municipal programs, again, a lot of them contract out to the same private companies. So these same private companies can work with you as a homeowner, or they can work with the municipality if that's what they're doing in your municipality, which I'm hoping to kind of do and start in Hanover. The company will generally provide the bins, or you can sometimes you have to purchase them yourself. There's again no backyard composters needed. They can be scheduled to pick up at your home or for an extra fee, or you can drop off at set locations. And municipalities will have different locations set up where there's toters, the lock or code where you can then go and drop off your organic waste, and then someone will come to those set specific sites and pick up, and you won't pick up at a set day and time. And again, you have to really think about the trade-offs. Is this or is this not really environmentally friendly, right? What part do you want to play in So these are some of the private compost companies in New Jersey. I'm not promoting any of them. I don't, these ones that I've kind of found online and do my research. There's Java Compost, Neighborhood Compost, Green Pocket Compost, Garden State Composting, Community Compost Company. And these companies will then work with these different sites. And then Andy or Maureen mentioned there's 2 sites in New Jersey. Actually, there's one major site that they would take composting with in Hanover. And then there's another site in Trent. And then they will process. And Community Compost actually takes their waste out of state into New York, near New Paltz, and they have their own farm. And so they're either go out of state to New York, or these ones will work with these processing facilities in Hanover or in Trenton. So if you're, building near Hanover and you have one of these companies come pick it up, and they're either trying to Hanover, when you closer forward, they're trying to all the way to Trenton. So again, you have to think about like all that, mileage that it's from like gas and can get to those facilities to process. But they have different plans that you can be a part of. They give you the bucket, sometimes they have a liner, some of the liners are not allowed. It depends again, do they let you use city compostable bags or not? Do you want to clean the bucket? It does get dirty, right? And in Toronto, like the bucket gets gross, and you've got to rinse it out. it's not a big deal though, it's just, you bring it out and, you know, your laundry thing or your utility thing. Like, sometimes you can share compost, bin, with a larger compost bin with your neighbors, if you want to do that, and that's another way to make it a little bit more, economically friendly. So you can get free compost back in the spring, and then, you know, drop off a certain number of feet back to you. One of them to month-to-month subscriptions, you can cancel any time. One provide personal impact statistics, you can see what impact you're making on the environment, the customer portal, other kinds of things that they provide. But you can do this, you know, based on whatever your needs are. If you want it to be a weekly pickup or a bi-weekly pickup or, you know, communal pickup. This is where communal pickup is usually when they've contracted with a municipality and you can go to that location. So, again, when you go to the next slide, actually, there's, yeah, so these are some municipalities that have community compost programs. So in Hoboken, they contract with community compost. And they have 12 sites throughout the city of Hoboken, which is like once in a while, sites that people can go and drop off their compost for free. And you get a lock code and then you can type the code and drop your stuff off there and they'll come pick it up right to you because it's once a week. And it's transported. So usually garbage from Hoboken is transported to a landfill and you actually do that. Right. And the tipping fees alone cost $106 per ton of waste.
You said the town provides that for free for all people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they provide the compost.
The access to it as a
Yeah.
homeowner, everyone gets that code?
Yeah. And so in comparison, the food scraps and other organic materials that are then taken to community compost farms, which is in Municipal, cost $20 per ton of waste. So it's it saves money for taxpayers and cutting down on the landfill fees. And the frequency of garbage collection. And so there's that. And then Milburn also began a pilot program in 2021 with 50 households, and the township is looking to grow that number. They're working with Java Compost, which is based in West Orange, and people can bring their food waste to Milburn Town Yard. We're collected weekly and then brought to the composting site in Hanover. Participants have to do like a Zoom training session, complete a brief quiz, and have to pay an annual $60 registration fee. And then they also receive the gallon pail and some compost for the day. In Leonia, there's a monthly fee of $16 to have access to the toters that are in one location that they can then take their compost to. So there's different ways that municipalities have done this. Some of them for free, some do it for like fees and pay the registration fees or a monthly fee. But different models that municipalities are looking at and working with these same type of companies that you can also, you know, as a private homeowner, if you don't have a municipal program, participate in. And I think, I don't know, quote me on this, but again, it depends, like if you want a weekly pickup or a bi-weekly pickup, or if you're sharing the toter with, you know, your neighbors, the cost vary. So yeah, so that's my very short presentation on how to be a lazy composter.
Why did you put that together? Is Hanover thinking of doing that?
I tried to get them to think of it, yeah. How far you got into it? I've gone into it by just doing kind of the background research on, you know, I've spoken with some of the companies and kind of got an idea of, you know, what would be needed, what do we need to think about, what would the costs be, yeah.
Yeah, because Morris Township is also looking at that, seeing the pros and cons.
Yeah. Yeah, just also thinking like, you know, if you had a communal pickup site, like where would that site be located? What would be needed for that site? How would it be managed? You know, would it be one site, would it be multiple sites? I think how many people to start the program? What would make it most efficient? So we're still kind of in the research phases of doing it, but the thing is, you know, as the next cycle of affordable housing comes online, and you know, we're gonna have more apartments or townhomes or housing units. It's important to kind of see like where a lot of that waste is and all the housing divert.
Yeah, I get the sense, or
Particularly in a lot like townhomes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like Morris Township, it's so many single family homes, but converting to townhomes is so much of our community is at this point, so it's. No, backyard composting seems to be the answer at this point, but it's losing its allure as we're getting more and more multi-family. You gotta figure out a solution.
We already had a backyard composting program. We gave out the same amount of permission as that, this was able to turn in a $10,000 grant. And we gave out about 200 for under appreciation.
I'm curious, have you done, or have you kept track of the individuals that you gave those food sheets to see whether or not they participated in that afterwards? Because I see that, what I would imagine is that some people would take those bins,
Right.
thinking that they're gonna do it, or maybe there's been turnover or whatever to see. If
You
they're
know,
doing
good
it.
question. With the program, actually, we did it during COVID.
Mhm.
And so it was just a crazy time, but we do have their emails and stuff, so we could go back and contact them. So you-
It might be, actually, that might be good if you're willing to do that, to see, you know, maybe if they didn't do it, what were the restrictions as to why?
Yeah.
You know, was it more work that they thought would be involved? Would you still participate? Then you could link it into your, maybe depot collection programs, and would this be more amicable for you guys if you were willing to travel to the site or do that?
We did try to, you know, in COVID, like we tried to provide them with the education along with it, so we had, you know, we had demonstrations, garden, we had online, you know, Zoom seminars, and we did a Facebook group that people could join, you know, so we tried to also have the education, not just give them the children.
You could also see who didn't do it and who's not going to do it, and how to give back to people that really do want to do it.
Yeah.
Because if you got the grant.
Yeah.
And you spend, you know, you spend the money to buy them.
Yeah.
Right, and they're sitting in someone's yard not being used, you never know if the circumstances change. Why not give it to someone, I mean, that would be a whole program you have to initiate, but.
Yeah, Maura and myself, we had actually called the state to get some guidance on some of the municipalities, you know, they were branching out. I had informed you before, like Denver was one that was looking to have a possible ordinance for multifamilies that they would be required to actually have an organic collection at their multifamily complexes. So we had inquired for that bill to see if that was something that they get involved in, or if they have siting issues, you know, say that, you can't put these bins at different locations. But the guidance we had gotten back was what we believe would be, it's more or less the municipality's decision. If there are a home, if there's a, like, say, a 95-gallon toter placed someplace, that's more of a zoning issue than a permitting issue at that point. But once you get to, you know, a community composting location, like you guys have next to your recycling depot, they would not be allowed to do that without a DEP permit. So that's where that lies. So if the town, like Township or Hanover, wanted to do something like that, his full drop-off program, they would be allowed to, but they should, and it's recommended, while they don't have to develop some sort of an ordinance to define. So I believe that was what we had, right?
There's also a New Jersey Composting Council that I met them a few months ago, or I think North Princeton. They have people from North and South Jersey there. So they're a good resource of that. I don't know if you work for them.
Yeah.
I think the other thing we wanted to mention too was that we had a follow-up conversation with them that the locations where they get brought to after they get things is something that is permitted or at least knowledgeable of where it's going. So it's not going to a farm somewhere that might not be permitted, or it's going to a, you know,
Or even worse, a guy's house in his
Yes.
backyard that's just getting money.
In New Jersey, there's pretty much only those two locations, right? I mean, we kind of need something to facility or the line. Either way, or.
Yeah.
Across state line.
So you know, this, so even for I think you two, facility, I mean, you want to make sure that if you have a municipal program that's going to be put in place, that every person that you would put on that list is sending into a food facility, because at the end of the day, it is the municipality's recyclables that have gone to, that site, that might be, something that could be a concern here. Just to make note of that, because there is a place that we have, that is bringing it to a place that was not allowed. And it's one of the three, so the one that's in Andover that you mentioned, that's Ag Choice, they're the ones that are on research. Research demonstration and development permit. And then the other two are waste management in Elizabeth, they have the digester and trailer, which is those are the only ones that are permitted.
Actually, then you have that, just, if they just blend
Blend
it,
it all up.
send it to the super.
Oh, that's
sewage
nice. They send it
facility. So they just, yeah, we're always
Yeah.
doing, so they just blend it up at the one facility in Elizabeth, it goes into the giant blender, goes into trucks, and then delivered to everywhere. I mean, it's a way of diverting waste from going to a landfill. Goes to a sewer plant, it's mostly water. So,
What would be, like that would be if we have smaller sites in a region that
Yeah.
we went to, but it doesn't work that way, so.
yeah, until DEP gets off their rear end with changing regulations to allow that, which I didn't get any sense of from that stakeholder meeting that we sat at the other day.
They're way behind, way behind.
Yeah.
Good discussion.
Thanks, everybody.
Good stuff, thank you.
Thanks for talking about all things rotten. Take about a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Five minute break.